The thing they told you about hard work was never the full story. You were told that if you showed up, kept your head down, did the job right, the system would reward you. And you believed it. Because why wouldn't you? It sounded fair. It sounded logical. It sounded like the kind of deal a reasonable person would just take. But here's the uncomfortable part. Nobody ever actually signed that deal. It was just understood, implied, whispered into the culture until everyone started acting like it was real. And that gap between what was implied and what was actually true, that gap is where office politics lives. You know the feeling. You stay late on a project nobody asked you to stay late for because you wanted to show you cared. You take on extra work stuff that's technically not even your job because someone said it would look good come review time. You pull a colleague's back. You cover shifts. You skip lunch. You send emails at 11 p.m. just to prove you're present, just to prove you're serious. And then the review comes. And your manager smiles and says something like, "We really value your contribution here." But the promotion goes to Dave. Dave, who has been here 2 years less than you. Dave, who leaves at 5 p.m. on the dot like clockwork. Dave, who happens to play golf on weekends with the VP. And you're sitting there thinking, what am I missing? The answer isn't effort. You've got plenty of that. The answer is, you've been playing by a rule book that was never actually the real rule book. Here's what most people never realize. Office politics isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. The corporate environment wasn't designed to be purely meritocratic. It was designed to function, to keep the machine running, to manage people, to retain talent without always paying for it, and to give decision makers the maximum amount of flexibility at all times. And that changes how you should see everything. Because when you understand that the system was built for organizational benefit first, suddenly a lot of things start making sense. The vague feedback, the "well, revisit this next quarter," the praise that never quite converts into anything real, the goals that keep shifting just when you're about to hit them. None of that is accidental. The process usually follows a pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. First comes expectation. You come in with energy. You genuinely believe the deal is real. Work hard, get rewarded. Simple, clean, logical. And in this stage, you're buying into it fully, no questions, no doubts. Then comes effort. So you give it everything. You go above and beyond. You actually care. You're invested not just in your paycheck, but in the outcome. This is where most people are operating at their absolute best. Then comes ambiguity. And this is where things start getting fuzzy. The feedback stops being clear. You're doing great, but there's always a but. The goalposts aren't exactly where you thought they were. Nobody tells you that you've failed, they just keep quietly adding conditions. Then comes rationalization. So you explain it away. Maybe the timing was off. Maybe the company had a rough quarter. Maybe next year will be different. You find reasons to keep believing because the alternative, that the system just doesn't work the way you thought, is too uncomfortable to sit with. Then comes disappointment, and it hits quietly. Not all at once. It's the slow, draining kind. You stop getting excited about projects. You start noticing how tired you are. You check the clock more. You feel the gap between what you're giving and what you're getting, and the numbers just don't add up anymore. Then comes detachment. This is what people call quiet quitting these days. But it's not really quitting. It's recalibration. Your brain is doing the math it should have done earlier, calculating what's actually worth giving and what just isn't. And finally comes cynicism. You become the person rolling your eyes in the team meeting. Not because you're bitter, though maybe a little, but because you've been through the cycle enough times to recognize the script, word for word, beat for beat. Here's why this hits so hard. Human beings are wired to respond to variable rewards. It's the same psychology that makes slot machines so addictive. It's not the guaranteed win that keeps you pulling the lever, it's the possibility of a win. The maybe, the not yet but possibly. Corporate environments run on this same mechanism, whether they know it or not. When your manager says we're looking to promote internally soon, they haven't promised you anything. But your brain hears possibility. And possibility activates effort. And sustained effort without a clear payoff, starts to wear people down in ways they often can't even put into words. Psychologists call this the expectancy trap. When the perceived effort-to-reward ratio breaks down, motivation doesn't just drop, it collapses. And worse, it poisons future effort too. Because now you've clocked that the game isn't straight. So how does the system actually hold itself together? Vague language keeps everyone flexible. We're working on your growth trajectory means literally nothing, but it sounds like something. And people are wired to fill gaps with hope. Moving expectations make sure the finish line never quite arrives. Just when you've hit the target grows. This isn't always malicious, sometimes it's just the reality of a growing company, but the effect on the individual is the same either way. Shared responsibility means no single person is ever accountable for your lack of advancement. It was HR's call, or the budget, or the restructure. The blame diffuses across the org chart until there's nobody left to point at. Delayed rewards keep people on the hook. Next performance cycle. End of fiscal year. Once we get through this phase, the longer the delay, the more effort gets extracted in the meantime. And then there's loyalty culture, and this one's the big one. Companies benefit enormously from people who feel emotionally tied to the mission. So the culture gets engineered, sometimes intentionally, sometimes just organically, to make you feel like leaving would be some kind of betrayal. Of your team, of your manager, of yourself. And here's what happens after a few rounds of all this. People burn out. Not the dramatic, crashing to the floor kind you see in movies. The slow grey kind, where you're technically showing up, but something inside has quietly left the building a long time ago. They disengage. They stop raising their hand in meetings. They stop bringing new ideas to the table. They start doing exactly what's required and not a single thing more, because they've learned, on a real deep level, that extra doesn't actually get you anywhere. They stop trusting, not just the company. They start side-eyeing every performance conversation, every all-hands meeting, every enthusiastic email blast from leadership. The trust that was there on day one has been chipped away, one vague promise at a time. And the saddest part, most of these people blame themselves. They think they weren't smart enough, political enough, strategic enough. They take the system's failure and turn it into a personal character flaw. That's the cruelest part of how this whole thing works. Now, to be fair, organizations don't always do this out of pure manipulation. Markets are unpredictable. Budgets get cut. Headcounts freeze overnight. A company genuinely might not be able to deliver what it loosely suggested 6 months ago. Managers are humans, too often stuck between what they want to give their people and what the folks above them will actually allow. None of that excuses the gap, but it does explain it. The real issue isn't that businesses have to operate inside uncertainty. The real issue is that the uncertainty gets hidden from the very people who are carrying the weight of it. When a company isn't sure it can deliver on something, the honest move is to just say so. But honesty carries risk. So instead, the language stays warm and promising and just vague enough to avoid any real commitment. And that's exactly where the damage lives. So here's where we land. Office politics, at its core, isn't just about who likes who or who's playing the game better. It's about the gap between what is implied and what is real. It's about a system that needs your belief more than it can afford your certainty. Because the moment you know for sure that the promotion isn't coming, that your effort won't be matched, that the culture is designed to extract more than it gives back, the moment you actually know that, you stop being as useful to the machine. So the machine keeps you wondering. It gives you just enough to stay, but not enough to feel settled. Just enough hope to keep showing up. And here's the thing nobody tells you when you start your first real job: if something is always implied but never guaranteed, it was never really a promise. It was just a way to keep people hoping. And once you truly see that, you finally get to decide what you actually want to do about it.